Why do we need more entrepreneurs right now? The entrepreneurs who create and run our businesses, who play by the rules, are in fact critical to our success as a nation. We need them especially today. Business, not government, will end this recession. Government must help by creating fair rules, sound monetary policy, and by protecting our fellow citizens in periods when they are jobless. We have to make way for the new entrepreneurial firms that will push us to frontiers of innovation.
An evolutionary biologist at Purdue University named William Muir studied chickens. He was interested in productivity. I think it's something that concerns all of us. But it's easy to measure in chickens because you just count the eggs. He wanted to know what could make his chickens more productive, so he devised a beautiful experiment. Chickens live in groups, so first of all he selected just an average flock and he let it alone for 6 generations. But then he created a second group of the individually most productive chickens. You could call them super chickens. And he put them together in a super flock. And each generation he selected only the most productive for breeding.
An economist sees the world basically through a typical microeconomic toolkit. That involves things like thinking at the margin, rationality, opportunity cost, trade-offs. Economists, like any other discipline, rules, and its own way of seeing the world. So basically economics, or economists in general, tend to apply microeconomic concepts like that to explain the way humans behave and to make predictions about the future.
Finally, we get a sneak peek of the world's largest interactive video installation that opens in London today. If you walk around Trafalgar Square in the next week, video cameras linked up to a computerized surveillance system will be tracking your every move. As you look down, one of over 1,000 animated portraits could appear in your shadow. These videos were created by people from across the UK who were asked to film themselves for 3 minutes, doing something that best represents them. The installation can project up to 14 portraits in the space.
Candace Galen is based at the University of Missouri in Columbia, and being a biologist, she thought, why not use this astronomical phenomenon to study a biological one? Specifically, as the skies darkened, would daytime pollinators, like bumblebees and bees, call it quits? What better activity during an eclipse than to go out with a recorder and record the bees? So, Galen asked 400 citizen scientists, including young students, to place audio recorders in 16 flower patches along the path of totality in Oregon, Idaho, and Missouri. When they analyzed the audio, they found that during partial eclipse, bee buzzing continued. But when totality hit, the bees went silent and only the conversational buzz of human observers could be heard. Then, as the moon passed and the sun again lit up the sky, The bees regained their buzz. If you're a senior citizen, music in the background may be distracting, but for younger people, experts at multitasking, it's apparently no big deal. That's according to a study in the journal Gerontologist. Researchers recruited 103 people, half between the ages of 18 and 30, the others between 60 and 75. The volunteers then took part in memorization exercises and a drill where they had to quickly match a photo of a face with the same face in an array of unfamiliar faces. Some participants did the exercises in silence. Others performed the tasks while listening to white noise or instrumental jazz, blues, classical, and electronic music. Across age groups, the consensus was that the background sound was distracting, but only older people's performance suffered when the noise was present. For example, older folks who did the face matching with music playing remembered 10% fewer faces. The result matches up with the theory that the elderly are less able to filter out what's called distracting task-irrelevant information. In this case, the distracting info might have interfered with them storing the facial image in the first place, much less impeding their ability to remember it a short while later.
Daniel Harris, a scholar of consumption and style, has observed that until photography finally supplanted illustration as the primary means of advertising clothing in the 1950s, glamour inhered less in the face of the drawing, which was by necessity schematic and generalized, than in the sketch's attitude, posture, and gestures, especially in the strangely dainty positions of the hands. Glamour once resided so emphatically in the stance of the model that the faces in the illustrations cannot really be said to have expressions at all, but angles or tilts. Illustrations cannot really be said to have expressions at all, but angles or tilts. The chin raised upwards in a haughty look, the eyes lowered in an attitude of introspection, the head cocked at an inquisitive or coquettish angle, or the profile presented in sharp outline, emanating power, the severity, like an emperor's bust embossed on a Roman coin.
Well, many states have age minimums for vaccination, but Black people have a shorter life expectancy than white people on the whole, so they are at higher risk of dying before they even reach the age cutoff. And many Black and Latino households are less likely to have high-speed internet and the time to spend online booking appointments. They're also less likely to own a car or be able to get to the vaccination sites. Language barriers and ID requirements also make it harder.
Researchers have studied the brain activity of people thinking through the classic and bridge versions. Both scenarios activate areas of the brain involved in conscious decision-making and emotional responses. But in the bridge version, the emotional response is much stronger. So is activity in an area of the brain associated with process internal conflict. Why the difference? One explanation is that pushing someone to their death feels more personal, activating an emotional aversion to killing another person. But we feel conflicted because we know it's still the logical choice. How does your smartphone know exactly where you are? The answer lies 12,000 miles over your head, in an orbiting satellite that keeps time to the beat of an atomic clock, powered by quantum mechanics. Whew, let's break that down. First of all, why is it so important to know what time it is on a satellite, when location is what we're concerned about? The first thing your phone needs to determine is how far it is from a satellite. Each satellite constantly broadcasts radio signals that travel from space to your phone at the speed of light.
Memory is such an everyday thing that we almost take it for granted. We all remember what we had for breakfast this morning or what we did last weekend. It's only when memory starts to fail that we appreciate just how amazing it is and how much we allow our past experiences to define us. But memory is not always a good thing. American poet and clergyman John Lancaster Spalding once said, "As memory may be a paradise from which we cannot be driven, it may also be a hell from which we cannot escape." Many of us experience chapters of our lives that we would prefer to never have happened. It's estimated that nearly 90% of us will experience some sort of traumatic event during our lifetimes. Many of us will suffer acutely following these events and then recover, maybe even become better people because of those experiences. But some events are so extreme that many, up to half of those who survive sexual violence, for example, will go on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder.
In 1798, when Edward Jenner discovered the first vaccine, it happened to be for smallpox, he didn't just discover a prophylactic for a disease, but a whole new way of thinking, that medicine could prevent disease. However, for over 200 years, this prevention was not believed to extend to psychiatric diseases, until 2014, when my colleague and I accidentally discovered the first drugs that might prevent depression and PTSD. We discovered the drugs in mice, and we're currently studying whether they work in humans. And these preventative psychopharmaceuticals are not antidepressants. They're a whole new class of drug, and they work by increasing stress resilience, so let's call them resilience enhancers.
These two paintings, both called Sunflowers, are generally accepted as the finest of several depictions of the thick-stemmed, nodding blooms that Van Gogh made in 1888 and 1889 during his time in Arles. The first is now in the collection of the National Gallery in London, and the second is in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. Van Gogh referred to this work as a repetition of the London painting. But art historians and curators have long been curious to know how different this repetition is from the first. Should it be considered a copy, an independent artwork, or something in between? An extensive research project conducted over the past 3 conservation experts at both the National Gallery and the Van Gogh Museum has concluded that the second painting was not intended as an exact copy of the original example, said Ella Hendricks, a professor of conservation and restoration at the University of Amsterdam, who was the lead researcher on the project.
The way we tell stories has naturally changed since Aristotle defined the rules of tragedy about 2,500 years ago. According to him, the role of storytelling is to mimic life and make us feel emotions. And that's exactly what storytelling as we know it has done very well since then. But there is a dimension of life that storytelling could never really reproduce. It is the notion of choices. Choices are a very important part of our lives. We, as individuals, are defined by the choices we make. Some of our decisions can have very significant consequences and totally change the courses of our lives. But in a play, a novel, or a film, the writer makes all the decisions in advance for the characters. And as the audience, we can only watch passively the consequences of his decisions.
We, humans, are becoming an urban species. So cities, they are our natural habitat. That is where we live. In 2014, over 54% of the world population was living in cities. And I can bet you that so many of these people have thought of how they would do things differently. Like, if I only had the tools to change things in my city, what would I do? What would my dream city be like? And these tools, this is just what we gave them. 2 years ago, my team and I, we released the game, City Skylines. It is a game about building cities.
There are countless reasons a woman may have for choosing to abstain from motherhood. The majority of them not self-prioritizing, but it is still socially acceptable to publicly vilify women as such, because none of these reasons have made it into the social narrative. When I was little and learning about the inevitability of maternity, it was never explained to me the commonness of these factors that women consider, like the risk of passing on hereditary illness, the danger of having to stop life-saving medication, the duration of your pregnancy, concern about overpopulation, your access to resources, and the fact that there are 415,000 children in the foster care system in the United States at any given time. Reasons like these, many more, and the fact that I don't like to leave things of this magnitude to chance, all informed my decision to become surgically sterilized.
Millions of roses get handed out on Valentine's Day, but growing roses has an environmental impact worse than many other crops. Start with climate change. Most roses in the US and Europe are imported from warmer climes. All that flying and trucking adds thousands of metric tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Then there's all the water needed to, well, water the flowers, and the runoff fouled by copious quantities of pesticides needed to make the roses look perfect. There's also the wildlife and workers poisoned by all that fumigation. Add to that habitat destruction where floral plantations displace native forest and wetlands. Finally, there's the refrigeration needed to keep those blooms fresh. The electricity is often produced by burning fossil fuels, and the refrigerant gases also exacerbate climate change. A more sustainable and possibly more romantic approach is to go with flowers certified by outfits like Veriflora, or even better, whatever flowers are in season locally.